If you were to create a monster from deep space, what features would you give it? Tentacles, a double set of teeth, maybe a body that adapts to any environment. It can have all of those things, or barely anything at all, and still be scary and impactful. Vampires and werewolves are terrifying because they are familiar. They come from our folklore, have understandable biology, and follow established rules that make them feel personal and tangible. Sci-fi monsters, on the other hand, have no such limitations. They transcend biology, physics, and even logic, making them entirely foreign to us. So in this video, I'll go over some of my favorite sci-fi monsters, of all sorts. You can expect spoilers for every title, and with that being said, let's get started. Of course, there is no sci-fi horror movie more iconic than Alien, and it holds that title to this day for many reasons, but the one I will focus on is of course the monster. The Nostromo isn't sleek or glamorous, it's a working-class spaceship. That mundane setting makes what happens next feel even worse, because there's no safety net, no laser blasters or elite soldiers, just a handful of tired workers who are totally unprepared for what they find. And that which they find would be the perfect organism, the xenomorph. From the moment the facehugger attacks the curious astronaut, you quickly realize there is no salvation, and that everybody here is doomed. What's so terrifying about this creature is how it doesn't just kill you, it violates you, turning your body into a breeding ground, and the xenomorph comes out. That biomechanical design, courtesy of H.R. Giger, is a perfectly twisted blend of organic and industrial elements. It looks like something that shouldn't be alive, a disturbing fusion of flesh and machinery. There's no reasoning with it, no understanding it, no hope of escape once it has you in its sights. The xenomorph is so terrifying because it gives something worse than death, the loss of control and the violation of the body. And it's not that the alien invaded Earth and attacked us unprovoked. It was humans that explored just a bit too far into space and scratched off a bit too many of its layers. And we were greeted with a nightmare. That scene with the final confrontation, when the xenomorph is squeezed into the wall, almost camouflaged, reinforces that it's equal parts machine and flesh. And for some reason, seeing it there in that scene feels kind of gross to me. It's like, imagine staring at a bunch of tech parts and wires, and not only do they start moving, but they are coming for you. The series features a variety of other creatures, including the massive and protective queen, as well as the runner, which takes over a dog, making it even more predatory than the default. Each one is terrifying in its own right, representing a different category of fear. But the two I find the scariest are the engineers and the offspring. The engineers seem to have created humans, but their true intentions remain a mystery. Their size and godlike presence are unsettling, but what's even more terrifying is their indifference towards their creations. Rather than being some benevolent makers, they view humanity as disposable, and their connection to the xenomorphs let us know that they've done this before. I believe they created them as a weapon. It's really unsettling to think that our origin could be attributed to some life form that doesn't even really like us. The offspring from Alien Romulus is the one I found physically the scariest. Maybe it's because this is the only Alien movie I saw in theaters, so it had a special effect on me. This guy is huge at 8 feet tall. It's quite freaky, and gives off uncanny valley vibes. It moves weird and looks weird, and the fact it looks more human than the default makes it all the more terrifying. When I saw the offspring, I got that same feeling when I first saw Alien, of how this thing just wants to intrude your body, take something from you that you would rather not give up. It came from a fetus injected with alien juice, and it also ate the girl that gave birth to it. That's what makes it so disturbing. It shouldn't exist. It's an abomination created through forced mutation, a creature that was never meant to live, and yet there it is, towering over everything, moving in ways that feel all wrong. And that's what makes Alien's monsters so effective. The xenomorphs, engineers, offspring, none of them follow the natural order. They aren't bound by human rules, human ethics, or logic. They exist outside of what is possible. And in doing so, they force us to reckon with a terrifying truth. The universe doesn't care about us. Our lives and bodies are not sacred. And if we scratch off enough layers of space, there is no limit to the terrors we may find. Like I said in the beginning, the cool thing about sci-fi monsters is that there are absolutely no rules. The writer's only limitation is that of his imagination. This brings me to another one of my favorites, Visitors from the Arkana Galaxy. In this story, a writer accidentally creates an entire galaxy just by writing a sci-fi novel. Through a process called telergy, his creations manifest physically and decide to visit him on Earth. What makes the visitors so memorable is how aware they are of their own limitations. They even complain about how underpowered they are because the writer wasn't creative enough.
To je lijepo od njega, ali da je na višem stupnju razvoja mogle su naše oči imati paralasere.
They're bound by his imagination, and he is entirely responsible for their faults and their actions. Even with their limitations, they're still weird and dangerous, able to shoot lasers, print food out of thin air, and turn people into cubes. Whatever the writer imagined, they can do. Besides the main visitors, the movie's pretty insane otherwise. And also there is another monster that wreaks havoc at a dinner party, and this one is a proper 50s sci-fi creature. So in the beginning, when I asked what features you would give a monster from deep space, well, if you answered everything, this is what you would get. This thing has a head-snapping tentacle, poisonous breath, it even shoots fire as well as some mystery goo. And naturally, nobody knows how to react. Nobody has seen anything like this before. They even make it a point in the movie that the photographer wants to get the first alien footage. Kind of similar to Nope, but let's take Salem's Lot as an example, just because I read it recently. In that story, when people start noticing that others are getting sucked dry, and buried bodies aren't staying buried, it clicks that there are vampires here. The characters are reluctant to accept that, but they ultimately do, because everyone knows vampires. And if you had to choose to face one, you would choose the vampire, because you know what it does, and it's the lesser evil. It can't enter unless invited, and you can scare it with a cross or garlic. However, when something like this comes in your house, not only is it there, but you don't know the lengths of what it can do. It's the embodiment of the unknown. For all you know, it can split your body into atoms. Very scary stuff. But now, let's take a step back from movies and take a look at one of the scariest sci-fi video games of all time, Dead Space, and just why it's so scary. The base level monsters in Dead Space are called necromorphs. They are sort of like zombies, corpses reconfigured, repurposed into something worse. Their spines twist into jagged spears, their arms split into talons, their faces stretch open like the transformation never quite finished. They move erratically, some crawling, some sprinting, and stopping them isn't as simple as a headshot. The only way to kill a necromorph is to tear it apart limb by limb, until there's nothing left, or they will get you. I had a lot of fun playing this game, not only shooting necromorphs, but finding bits and pieces of the lore scattered throughout the spaceship. I would say the game does that part really well, and I really enjoyed those moments. Like you are exploring this ship filled with blood and necromorphs and death at every corner, and you are trying to piece together the fragments of what's going on. Here I went to the medical center and found this text log who talked about a guy who had some visions and saying them out loud ruined the message, and that his dreams need to speak. Also, there was another text log I found about an organic mass that looked disgusting and kept spreading through the ship, and then eventually I ran into it. And that's why necromorphs are cool, because the game doesn't rely on them as the main bad guy. In fact, they aren't even bad guys, just corpses who got corrupted and changed. There are more cards on the table. Necromorphs are just the lowest level threat, only a step of something larger. The reason I call the necromorphs base level monsters is because what created them is sort of the real monster, and these are called the markers. Massive, spiraling monoliths covered in strange alien script. These things bring me to my next section. Cosmic horror entities from space. These markers sound like something straight out of a Lovecraft story, very similar to the pillar from Dagon, or even the town in At the Mountains of Madness. They don't attack or spread like a virus, they just exist, and that alone is enough to give us space zombies. At first, they seem passive. People near them start hearing whispers. Nothing too crazy, just something on the edge of perception. Then come the dreams, symbols and patterns that don't quite make sense, but they feel important. And then things start to change. Scientists go from studying the markers to obsessing over them. It's a classic Lovecraftian concept, people going mad over an object. Workers carve spirals into walls instead of doing their jobs. And when enough bodies pile up, the marker does its thing. This is when necromorphs are born. The corpses break apart and reassemble. Bones stretch into weapons, and human features are left barely recognizable. Yet the necromorphs aren't even the final step. The true goal of the markers is convergence. This results in a Brethren Moon, a massive sentient ball whose goal is to consume every living being in the universe. And there are many of them. Each marker that succeeds in convergence makes one. That's what makes Dead Space so scary. When you're there on the spaceship, there are necromorphs coming at you, body horror on the surface. But the more you dig, you find the existential dread of something far older and smarter than us. And these Brethren Moons sound like the worst thing ever. They consume everything. It doesn't get much worse than that. Yet maybe the scariest sci-fi monster, in my opinion, isn't one that turns us into wombs or cubes, but it is rather just a rectangle. 2001: A Space Odyssey shows us a very ominous entity that lets us know that we are completely insignificant in this world, that we are nothing more than ants in the face of something far older and more advanced than we could ever imagine. And I am not talking about the evil AI, but the black monolith. A featureless black rectangle that appears across different points in human evolution, silently observing and nudging us forward when we are too primitive to understand what's happening. It falls in that same category as the engineers from Alien, that fear that humans were created and directed by something whose motives remain a mystery. Something that can alter and destroy us as easily as it created us. It first appears with the apes, and teaches them to use tools and weapons. The second time is on the moon, and it points astronauts towards Jupiter. And perhaps it appeared at numerous other points in our history, ensuring we are fulfilling some purpose that we aren't even aware of. We never actually find out what this thing is. Is it a machine, a life form, a symbol? It doesn't matter, because the real horror is that it's there at all. Something, somewhere, left it behind. And this tells us that not only are we not alone in this universe, but we are at the mercy and influence of whatever controls this thing. And when you look at it, there's not much to look at. There's nothing to grab onto. No seams, no markings, no sense of intent or purpose. It could be solid metal or pure energy. It doesn't care to be understood, because we weren't meant to understand it. Eventually, we encounter the monolith for the third time in Jupiter's orbit, and it still doesn't provide any answers. It's like even though we came so far, it still isn't nearly far enough to earn a logical response from this thing. Instead, it transforms one of the astronauts into something we can't fully explain. Perhaps this is the next step of human evolution. Like it changed the apes, it changed us as we are now. What I love about this entity is that it never breaks the silence. It doesn't explain or threaten. It simply exists, and by doing so, it changes everything. At first glance, the planet Solaris appears lifeless. A barren world with a toxic atmosphere. orbiting twin suns in a suspiciously stable path. But beneath its swirling clouds lies something unlike anything humanity has ever encountered. An ocean that is not just liquid, but sentient. It weighs over 700 billion tons, covering nearly the entire planet's surface. Yet, it has no cells, organs, nervous system, no structure that resembles life as we understand it. And yet, it moves and thinks. For decades, scientists have struggled to classify it, let alone communicate with it. Sometimes it seems curious, responding to our experiments with strange, shifting movements. Other time, it ignores them entirely. Who knows what criteria it has to determine whether it will interact or not. Its intelligence remains a mystery, but its most extraordinary ability is control over magnetic and possibly even gravitational fields. It doesn't just exist on Solaris, it governs it, stabilizing the orbit. A creepy thing the ocean does is that it constantly generates massive, intricate structures across the surface. Formations so complex that they appear to have a purpose, yet nobody knows what that might be. Some last for weeks, and others collapse within minutes, dissolving back into the ocean. It also causes visions. The ocean can reach into the minds of those who orbit above it, pulling out their most buried thoughts, fears, and grief, and manifesting these as living, breathing beings, flesh and blood, existing outside the person who remembers them, with no understanding of what they are. The ocean does not explain or acknowledge the horror it has created. Who knows if it even knows it's doing it? That's what makes Solaris so interesting. It doesn't seek to harm or control, or does it reach out in the way humans would expect. It exists beyond understanding, beyond the ability to even classify it, let alone reason with it. Thank you very much for watching. I was initially going to do 2 segments, one for monsters and one for environments, which is why I made that post about Blam. But I decided to split this into 2 videos because there was too much stuff, so to give me a bit more time to get everything correctly. So that will be the next video, and I'll see you then. Once again, big thank you.